Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We're going to have a look today at another product for the Harn world setting from Columbia Games, and that is the Kingdom of Retheme, or Rethem as it is called by some. So let's place this in context of Harn. Obviously we have, the whole island of Harn here. The Kingdom of Retheme is part of this region in Western Harn called the Thard River Basin. This is the Thard River that runs from Lake Benoth up here down to the Boca Bay and the Gulf of Aderwin, and it's the border in most cases. You'll notice actually that there's no borders on the map, and I think that's intended to reflect that the border situation is fairly dynamic and subject to dispute, as it certainly is here. So the rivers themselves kind of divide this area into its three states. Now, this is not a perfect. It's not quite that tidy, but generally speaking, south of the Thard is the Kingdom of Canday. North of the Thard and to the west of the Gomisen River here is Retheme, and to the west. To the east of that is the Republic of Tharda, the Thardic Republic, which we'll talk about in detail in a later episode. But today we're going to talk about the Kingdom of Retheme, a great rival to the Kingdom of Canday. They have fought at least one very recent war called Izar's War, which we talked about in the Canday video, and I'm sure we'll touch upon that again in this video. And there is it is an evil kingdom in that's a bit of an oversimplification, but it's not entirely untrue either. The religious climate of the Kingdom of Retheme is dominated by the churches of Aggregate and Morgath. The so-called good churches are illegal here, Lorani and Peony. Nevertheless, there is a certain amount of Peony worship that does happen amongst the common people. But also popular among the common people is the religion of Morgath, the Lord of Darkness and Lord of the Undead, who kind of teaches that everything will be the same in the afterlife. And then, of course, the Church of Aggregate, the evil god of fire and war. So let's dig into the module. Right away, we notice that it's a beefy 72-page module. That does include a front cover and some maps and stuff, so we'll get into that. Obviously, we have this guy on the cover is clearly intended to be a member of the Fighting Order of the Copper Hook. The medallion that he's brandishing here is clearly a fallen member of the Order of the Checkered Shield, which we talked about in the Canday episode. A fighting order of Lorani versus a fighting order of Aggregate. So here is our political map, and unfortunately it's in landscape format on this particular page, so it's going to be super awkward. I might be able to rotate, right? Yeah, okay, we can rotate, cool. So we can see the details of the kingdoms here, and this will show us the different fiefs and who is responsible for them. So we have three earls, as we do in Canday. We have the Earl of Ithaco, the Earl of Tekken, and the quite powerful Earl of Tormau, who we'll get back to. And then there's Golotha, which is a chartered free town and an absolute cesspool. And then there's some keeps that are subject directly to the king. The Shastim, for example, is the royal seat of Retheme. So let's rotate back. And here we have the Poetic Map, which is what it's called here, of Retheme. And again, you can photocopy this onto fancy schmancy paper and hand it out to your players to present as a physical artifact that the characters have as their map of the area. Okay. All right, so we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. Location, Western Harn. Those are the Atlas map squares. It's a monarchy ruled by King Chafin III. Population 95,000 with a royal seat at Shastim. And the largest settlement is, of course, the free city of Golotha. I should probably get to a Golotha video and I probably will at some point, but not today. It has its own very long, very elaborate, very detailed article, and there's a lot going on there. We're going to talk about it's bounded by the Kingdom of Canday to the south, the Kuboran tribal lands to the north, which means that, unlike Candé, there is an actual frontier in Retheme that opens up certain adventure avenues that in Candé you might not have, right? The Paran Wilderness. The wilderness, if we look here, we'll see this large area populated by barbarians is no home to the Kubora. The kingdom of Retheme was actually founded by a Kuboran war chief. Northern forests are rich in timber and furs. Abundant minerals of the lowlands have been extensively mined. Fertile Thard Valley. We can actually see that on the original map. It's a bit hard to make the color out, but this area around the rivers is all cultivated land. So it is quite fertile. And as was the case historically, the pattern of habitation follows where you grow the crops. So Retheme's 8th and current ruler, King Chafin III, is not the product of a long and respected dynasty. His clan seized the throne 40 years ago. He is, we're going to talk about this, he is aware that 5 of Retheme's 7 monarchs have died violently. And he has rivals within the kingdom, as well as having to worry about a possible next war with Candé. And so we've got guys comparing their severed heads. So it's not a nice place, right? Here we have our history article. This is going to go all the way back to the Atani Wars, which we have talked about in previous videos, I think. We're going to get into, let's see here, end of Imperial Control. So this is the Korani Empire, which falls apart, is replaced by the 20 or so year reign of the theocracy of Tekos. There is an interregnum. Golotha is kind of the last hanging on remnant of the theocracy of Tekos. This is the second theocracy, or Golothan theocracy. And it's still a political force, but then we get Arlen the Barbarian, who is a warrior chief of the Kubora, and who basically comes in and conquers the area and declares himself king. Spends his reign consolidating and expanding his domain against resistance from Candé and the Thardic League at the time. And this is the basic area in question, and then above this is the Kuboran nation. In 635, so remember that it is the current year 720, and Harn stipulates that at no point do the official materials take you beyond 720. So there's no set mega plot. After 720, it's all you. So 635 is 85 years ago. So, not that long ago that this kingdom was founded. Arlen conquers a bunch of land, but then when he dies, a lot of those lands fall away. And what is left over is the kingdom of Retheme. And then here we get to Ezra's War, which is, of course, the two fighting orders start this war between the fighting order, the Order of the Copper Hook, a fighting order of Lorani, the Lady of Paladins, and another fighting order, the Order of the Copper Hook. Did I say Copper Hook? The Order of the Checkered Shield is the fighting order of Lorani, the Lady of Paladins. The Order of the Copper Hook is a fighting order of Aggregate. And the two have been skirmishing this whole time. And finally, their skirmishes explode into this actual war, which is Ezra's War, which Retheme loses in a fairly humiliating way. So Chafin I, eldest son of Cabe, is the king during the end of Ezra's War, actually. Unable to maintain the stalemate. He orders the Aggregate order. So the way I should actually, again, I keep talking about this. I should do a video on the gods of Harn. We'll see if we can get that accomplished at some point soon. But many of the gods of Harn have organized churches. In some cases, they're fairly disorganized churches. And there are orders that sort of represent either a sect within the church, the greater church, as in the case of Lorani or Aggregate, or kind of an independent church, as in some of the orders of dedicated to Ilver, for example. And then there are also fighting orders. And if you were to draw the connection between fighting order and like the Knights Templar or the Knights Hospitaller, that's not entirely inaccurate. They are kind of subordinate to the clerical orders. So each clerical order has a sponsor that is each fighting order has a sponsor that is a clerical order. So there's kind of a hand-in-hand relationship. So this Order of the Crimson Dancer, I think, is the fighting order to assassinate Queen Ariel of Candé. This assassin is successful, but they catch them and they confess under interrogation. Don't think they don't torture anybody in Candé. So Chafin sues for peace. Peace of Selvos ends Izar's war, and Chafin executes Izar himself, Izar being the Grand Master of the Order of the Copper Hook. The Order of the Crimson Dancer so blackens its reputation in Retheme that it ends up leaving the country entirely. And then we have Chafin II, and now we're at Chafin III. So his big issue is he is under a lot of pressure from the Aggregate Church because they're fanatics, and we can talk about this. And then he has the somewhat competing Morgathian Church that basically doesn't run Golgotha nominally, but it's the most powerful single faction in Golgotha in running the city. And then he's got some tensions with Tharda. And most importantly, he has a huge rival within the Kingdom of Retheme, the Earl of Tormau. Earl Denil Linnaeus hates the king and he hate one another. And it is, and I've used this as a plot hook in the past. And once again, in case you haven't picked up on this in the many previous videos, there's plot hooks in every paragraph here, right? So the Earl Denil has not sworn fealty to Chafin III, and neither he nor his holdings have paid taxes since Chafin's reign began. If the Earl does not swear fealty soon, the king may be forced to declare him a traitor, strip him of all titles, and even sentence him to death. But you'll notice when you go back to the map, if the Earl can retain his current holdings in that type of situation, right? That's the blue guy, right? These guys all here. These guys are all these castles and the castle at Tormau and these two keeps plus these various constables and barons owe fealty directly to Tormau rather than to the king. So this could easily result in a civil war, which might end up with either of the two or neither of the two on the throne at the end of the conflict. If there is a civil war, how do Retheme's neighbors react to that? Certainly there are factions within Candé who would like to stamp out the threat of Retheme once and for all. On that list is surely the Order of the Checkered Shield, and its sponsoring a clerical order probably wouldn't mind either. But there's also a very skilled general in the Thardic Republic who has been kind of assigned to an out-of-the-way post because the Senate is afraid of him. Maybe he calls in some favors and gets reassigned to that frontier and sets out upon a campaign of conquest. And if he conquers Retheme, then Candé must necessarily be next to reestablish the Khorani Empire, as could be his goal. So this is rich with opportunities for things to go on here. All right, so succession threats. Earl of Tormau, missing children of Chafin I. All of this, these missing children could end up being the PCs, right? So, or at least one of the PCs. Absolutely ripe with plot hooks here. The Book of Lost Names. Sanguine Saltire maintains a Book of Lost Names that lists all known information about these missing people. The Sanguine Saltire, I think, is the College of Heraldry here, I think. It probably has mentioned that in the article already, and because I'm skimming it, I missed it. All right, so religion. This is one of the more interesting things about Retheme, because the churches of Morgath and Aggregate and Nave are illegal everywhere else on Harn, except here, okay? Nave, I think, is actually still proscribed, but nobody actually cares. And the... Nave has a big presence in Golotha, for example. Although they're not like on the city council like the Morgathians are. But because that's just not how the Church of Nave works. All right, so this makes me think that, especially now talking about Retheme, that the Harn religion article is in fact overdue. So we'll check into that. All right. Worship of Aggregate. Agricanism is the primary religion of the nobility of Retheme, and it's very powerful politically, and that includes all of these different orders. Do we have a list of those? There is a list of these. I'm just not sure where they would be in this particular article. They probably show up at the end. Okay, so Peony is still worshipped by most peasants, although it's illegal. We keep that quiet. Others see Peonianism, and some nobles actively persecute Peonians. So it's kind of illegal, but some people don't care. As it mentions here, some of the nobility see the faith of Peony as a religion that makes the weak stay weak, which is at the antithesis of the faith of Aggregate, by the way. Lorani, on the other hand, worship of Lorani is vigorously persecuted where it appears, but it doesn't appear very often. The Halian church is popular among merchants and nobility along the Thard and in Golotha. In any big city, the Church of Halia. Halia is sort of the goddess of pleasure and wealth. So she is popular among merchants anyway. So you can imagine that in large cities, especially, her temple can be fairly prominent. It's not terribly prominent in Golotha. It's more prominent in the Thardic Republic. Sariane, the king of the icy wind. This is the Viking god of the Evinians, and a sort of cross between Odin, Thor, and Tyr. And then he has a bunch of sons and the various demigods that follow Sariane specifically. So it's kind of its own sort of sub-pantheon. Nave, which we've talked about. Now, further discussion of all these will wait. Save Canor is not illegal, I believe, but it's not popular either. It's never a popular church because he's kind of the god of knowledge and of secrets. That's just not popular in a sort of early medieval type of setting that we have here. And then the Church of Ilver, who is a bizarre creator deity who creates whimsical creatures out of body parts from other gods, basically. And again, we'll talk about him more in the religion video. And then Siem, who is sort of the sort of guiding spirit type deity. He's a deity of nature. And again, this mentions the Uthrium Roliri, who I've been told there is some more detail on, so we'll get to that in a later video. But he is worshipped by the dwarves and elves, for example, and by some humans, but not a popular deity among humans. And then, of course, we have the Kuboran tribal religions, which will get discussed more in the Kubora article, which maybe we'll get to at some future time. Here's some stuff on the economy of Retheme, some of the powerful guilds. The Hideworkers Guild is prosperous, anyway. And that's because, I think, there's a huge frontier to the northern border of Retheme and plenty of places to go. And trade crosses that frontier, too, right? So there's a lot of fur trade and stuff like that. It's charcoalers and miners guilds. The Salters Guild is fairly powerful everywhere. There's also a Pomasani Arena in Golotha, so there's some demand for strange creatures to fight in gladiatorial battles. And, of course, there's gladiators, too. And here's our economic table that will tell us, okay, so if we're in Tormau, we have surpluses of beasts and charcoal and a need to import copper, for example. So culture is where, again, one of those interesting things about Retheme specifically, because it's got such a weird dynamic going on, where you have sort of this harvest deity worshipping peasant class, but then there's also a fairly popular cult of evil undead god among the lower classes. And then you have an assassin and thief god who's got relatively few followers, but they can have a lot of impact, not influence necessarily, although that could happen too. And then the ruling hierarchy, the nobility, follows Aggregate. So you have that sort of weird religious dynamic going on here, where you have a lot of push and pull between factions that are not aligned at all, right? And nowhere are any of those four religious forces in alignment, right? In some cases, they live with the other ones, like the Aggregants don't care too much about the Peonians. Nobody really cares too much about the Nevians, except to know that they are there and that you have to watch out for them. There's a significant amount of tension between the temples of Morgath and Aggregate. Music, drums and brass horns. So it even talks about musical instruments. That's actually pretty cool. Clothing and fashion, folk holidays. There is, by the way, an extensive religious calendar for Harn, which, when we talk about the gods, we'll talk about that. Pamasani games, Golotha and Shastim are the two places where there are Pamasani arenas. Here's crime and punishment. It's not a nice place. And it talks about, the different types of crimes and the punishments thereof. And this is definitely the kind of place where, if you are executed, they're going to make an example of you and stick your head on a pike or put your body in a gibbet or something like that. Not that is, the English used to do that a lot. So example, William Wallace, for example, was cut into 4 quarters and the 4 quarters sent to the corners of England to be displayed as an example. Here is the achievements of the great clans of Retheme, the heraldry. Here's the descriptions of the heraldry. And there should be somewhere... Doesn't actually talk about the college, but that's mentioned in here somewhere. Here's the dynastic table of the kings of Retheme. And you'll notice that Arlen's line ends at Nemiran, and Clan Araku takes over with Peril, and thus down to Chafin III. Here is the royal government. The Lord Marshal controls the military. I wonder if he's loyal to the king. I bet the king's wondering that. Chafin is well aware that his grandfather Peril, a captain of the royal guard, founded the dynasty by murdering the current king. So Chafin entrusts this command to a loyal relative. How loyal are they? Lord Chamberlain, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Lord Chancellor. Here's... do we not have a picture of Chafin III? I'm pretty sure there is one somewhere. Here's one of the Chancellor, Baron Joseph Seorsaxa. That's how I think that's supposed to be pronounced. That's tough to pronounce. So we have a couple pages on the various personalities that are in charge of things in the Kingdom of Retheme. Here is the description of the breakdown of the kingdom into shires and hundreds, which is, of course, as we discussed in the video on Candé, separate from the actual feudal fiefs and forest hundreds. There are descriptions of all of the various forests. Military resources. And here's our table of military resources, so we can see that Arketh Keep has a garrison. Where's the table for this? HHMH. wonder what these numbers mean. Okay, so heavy horse, and medium foot is what these are going to mean. And then there's a retinue. So this is the sort of war band of the noble fella in charge. So this guy right here has got a pretty big war band, right? The whoever's running High-End Keep has twice as much war band as this guy running Arketh Keep. And they're both just keeps, right? These are going to be equivalent. Akarata. I'm going to have to... Oh, I haven't seen this in a while. That makes me wonder if maybe this article is scheduled for revision. So what Battle Lust is a set of miniatures rules that Columbia Games released many years ago. I don't believe it's available anymore. I could be mistaken about that. I have it. I've never had the chance to play it because miniatures are something I have historically tried to stay away from for reasons I'm not going to go into here. The Royal Guard. Few feudal states have permanent armies. In Retheme, few major nobles are without one. And that's in part due to the large amount of tension that exists within the ruling class of Retheme. So, Morgathian forces. These are, the Aggregans will consider this rabble, but manpower is manpower. Military use of Golmorven. So, Golmorven are one of the types of undead on Harn. So this is something that, as far as I'm aware, has never actually been a something that has been decisive. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people around in the kingdom and outside of the kingdom that think it could be a factor, right? So that's something that Sir Jasif here thinks is potentially something to be concerned about. Morgathian settlements. It says few of Retheme's rural residents openly worship Morgath, but a number of the kingdom's settlements are held by men with Morgathian backgrounds. You'll notice, of course, and I think this is not an accident, the similarity in names between the Harnic deity Morgath, the Lord of the Undead, and the Tolkien's Morgoth, the Black Enemy. I think that's intentional, and that's kind of one of those things where the names just kind of hung around. They're similar but not identical. The sort of portfolios of the two are not identical. Morgoth of Tolkien is much more of a Luciferian type of figure that wants to corrupt things. The Harnic Morgath is more of an undead who, I guess, wants to corrupt things, but also wants them to vanish into an oblivion from which they shall never emerge. Mercenary Companies. There's a lot of mercenaries here. Here's an entire mercenary band, the Army of Honamshire, and he's got some medium foot, SB. I don't know what those are. He's got some ships. More medium foot, light foot, more ships, more light foot. So this is a decent-sized army. There's a lot of military here. Which does make you wonder why they lost the Izar's War. And here's the Agrican fighting orders. There are 6 of these. Their numbers are not huge, right? So let's see if we have numbers here. We might. The Warriors of Memeka, the Master of Steel. Sponsored by the Clerical Order of the Master of Steel. The Agrican Company. Okay, so this is a general statement about the Agrican Company. The Akarata's Guard. These are the Grandmasters that have their own personal guards. The Red Shadows of Herpa the Mace. These are really cool names, by the way. And we have heraldry for the fighting orders as well. The Companions of Roving Doom. They have traditionally served Retheme kings as leg breakers. The Order of Demon Pameshlu the Insatiable. The Cohorts of Gashang, the Order of the Copper Hook. There is an article, I don't know if it's an official or unofficial article. Lithia.com is a site that you want to take a look at it for fan stuff on Harn, by the way. And I'm not sure if that Copper Hook article is a fan creation from Lithia.com or if it was an official article at some point. So here's the sub-infeudation table. which again shows the free town of Galatha, Earl Linnaeus of Tormau and his 3 vassals, Earl Leneske of Tekken and his 2 vassals, and Earl Barzak and his 1 vassal. They have more vassals, but those are the vassals who are barons. And then, of course, the Aggregate fighting orders have their own keeps as well in some case. The Red Shadows of Herpa holds the castle, right? It's not even a keep. It's a big castle at Menakai. And then the Order of Companions of Roving Doom have a fortress keep at Arketh. The Warriors of Memeka at Badinas. And the Copperhook at Hien. And the Chorus of Gashang at Themison. So what's this? Orgat. I'm not sure who that is. But now we're going to get into the individual depictions of the individual settlements. And in many cases, I'll point out that these locations have individual articles on them. We're not going to go through these in detail, except to note that, again, this whole section is very rich with with plot hooks. And very nicely illustrated. I think Richard Luschek is probably the illustrator on all of these. That's definitely appears to be the case on the pages that we're looking at the moment. Okay. Oh, and the Peleon. Okay, so magic in Harn is also something that we'll have to talk about in a separate video. But for the purposes of our discussion here today, there is a guild called the Guild of Arcane Lore. And that guild is populated by arcanists of all types. Alchemists and herbalists and things like that. Delvers into obscure knowledge, right? Which may or may not be magic per se. But within the order, the Guild of Arcane Lore are the orders of the Shekvar. And there are 6 different sort of sub-orders within the Shekvar. And this is the actual society of mages on Harn. And there are chantries scattered throughout the island. And off the island as well. And one of the divisions of the Shekvar is the Order of Peleon, which is they're sort of specialists in fire magic, very dynamic. Go figure that they'd be here where the evil god of fire is ascendant. But there is a world-class Peleon chantry here at Shastim. So we got a thing on that. And I mean, without looking at the number, there is a number that I can find out how many mages actually live here. I know where that table is, but it might not be in this article. But it's probably something like 6 or 8 mages are resident there, not all of which are necessarily in the building at any given time. So we can learn about that too. Here's Earl Daniel Linnaeus. Daniel. Yeah, okay. That Y is supposed to be the E sound. I can tell you that. Then again, don't get hung up on the pronunciations. I always find that pronounce it how you think it sounds cool, and your players will tend to pronounce it the way you do. And if they get more into Harn than you are and start, correcting you, then maybe let them run their own game. Here is a settlement index of all the settlements that are on the Atlas Harnica maps. And then here's the back cover. And we can see Retheme placed in its proper context. All right, so as is almost always the case when I set out to do one of these, I have sort of laid the groundwork for future work in this field in terms of videos. So if you've enjoyed the videos and you'd like to see Harn content specifically, please let me know in the comments below. Please like the video if you've enjoyed watching it. Please share the video around on social media, and if you want to support Ardwulf's Lair, there's a Patreon link in the video description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy gaming.